He's got 2 Guinness Book of World Records. He's had his own action figures. He's had 3 signature shoes. He's had multiple characters in video games. You might have seen him as a stuntman in such movies as Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, American Sniper, Captain America. He was also the host of a show called Strangers in Danger. Voted one of the top 100 people to follow on Instagram by Rolling Stone magazine. So they say.
They tell me too.
So that's what they tell him. Mike is always up for an adventure as the originator of Be the Adventure hashtag. It's not so much about just going, but really empowering people to get outside of their comfort zone and really living their best life possible. Let's give it up for Mike Escamilla. What up, dude?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going.
Yeah.
Have a seat.
All right.
Thanks for being here.
Hey, everybody. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having us.
I mean, you've had such a long career in so many things, but I really want to start with just like the bike riding and like your early years. And when we were talking on the phone, you talked about how you and your friends as teenagers would just go, and you just wanted to find places to ride.
Yeah, I mean, it was just pretty much more like a normal kid. We just rode our bikes around the neighborhood, but I had a neighborhood that had a lot of kids in it. There was like 13 or 14 kids all my age within like a 2 or 3 blocks. So we rode everywhere, but at some point, they all sort of got cars or in trouble, and I just kept riding. And then so my only friend that I really rode with lived about 13 miles away, so I would ride to his house every day, or on the weekends every day. And we just sort of rode everywhere, and it just sort of became like we were like our own little explorers, because I feel like that's lost. Before, people were discovering pyramids and things that were lost to the jungle, and we were discovering stairs and rails and banks in these alleyways. And so every corner we turned was just like another, it was like every time we went around a corner, it was another amusement park we could find, So.
And you said that, talking about like roads that you've turned down so many roads looking for that thing you could ride or that thing you can jump.
It's funny, actually, yesterday, me and my buddy who I've been riding with for 20 years, we were both like, we've never been on this road before. And it's like in California, especially Southern California, there's few roads that I haven't been on or alleyways I haven't been down. So it's pretty fun. Every once in a while, I'll go down somewhere. I'm like, I don't even know where we're at, which is still pretty fun for me.
So just the passion of riding, and then kind of led to you got on a couple tours. Like, you were still a teenager the first time you went on a tour?
Yeah, the first time I traveled across America, I was like 15.
Was that the one like you just kind of followed around?
No, that was like an actual, there was a contest, and I went with this group of there was a house in Westminster called the POWs, Pros of Westminster, and it was like just a pretty dirty household of scumbaggy dudes that were the best people on the planet. And I just said, hey, can I go with you to this contest in Oklahoma? And somehow my parents said yes, which is crazy. And there was 7 of us and all the bikes inside a minivan. And we just went there, and we went there 2 weeks early and slept under the ramps and on the ramps at this contest. That's when people started to know who I was, and that's kind of where it started.
So it started there, then you did...
And then I started to get sponsors.
Right.
And so a lot of the sponsors back then, I grew up with a lot of skateboarders. Went to high school with a couple other pro skateboarders, Paul Luna and Jeremy Ray, Jonas Ray. And so I kind of started... I would try to get sponsored by the companies that were sponsoring skateboarders because it was just felt more lifestyle-y at the time. And so those brother brands actually had skate teams and surf teams and snow teams. And so I started to get to go on all these trips with all these different sports. And that's how I started doing everything.
Well, because I want to bring some up, because I was reading that, you also became a huge advocate for BMX. Where a lot of these guys are like, the skate people were like, oh, it was more skate, it was this. And like, you were also just a very, vocal advocate for BMX that like, oh, if we're going to get paid this, and the skaters are getting this, we should all be like even playing field.
Yeah, which BMX is a weird sport in the fact that it tries to stay, at least at the time, really hardcore. And for some reason, hardcore means very poor. And I was working with companies that skateboarders were making, they were making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for a pro shoe, or they were making, when the team manager would buy gifts for Christmas, they would all get flat screen TVs. Now, taking this is like 95, 96, and we were getting like a mug that said "Go BMX" or something. And I was like, this is crazy, and it was just, and it really is one of those things. And a lot of people for a long time were like, oh, well, you're all about money. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm like, it's weird that you're saying that because I'm only putting money in your pocket, because I ended up being the team manager for a little while. And it was more like, hey, we love doing this, but the more money you put into it, the more they're going to be willing to support it because now it's an investment for them, you know, and it also helps put more money into the industry so we can all do more trips and it makes more content. So for me, it made sense. I'm like, why would it be like going to work and you doing the same job as the guy next to you, except you got paid an eighth of what he did because it wasn't cool to pay rent.
And then you were able to help design, promote, and work on a bike. You did that with Tony Hawk.
Yeah,
creating the kids' bike that actually turned out to sell like millions of bikes.
Yeah, like years later, me and Tony Hawk, close friends. We've toured together since '99. I've been on a bunch of big tours with him, a bunch of little tours with him. And he's one of my closest friends. And somewhere about a decade ago, he had an opportunity to do a line of products that were going to be sold for entry-level skateboards, bikes in Targets and Walmarts and Toys R Us. So he asked me to come and consult with the bikes, and we actually ended up selling like over 700,000 bikes in just a few years.
We round that up.
Yeah, around a million plus. But I know, it was a great opportunity to be able to work with that, and really it made me realize the problem with the bike riding industry. Because the core bike riding is really small industry, and it's all done by, most bikes sold at IBDs, which is independent bike dealers. And it's uncool to have cheap stuff. But one of the problems is that there's a customer at every price point. The kid in wherever who gets a bike, he's not going to go buy a $600 bike. He needs a $100 bike. He's going to leave it on the grass, and it's going to get stolen or rusted.
But it's catered to everyone.
Yeah, but it's the few that don't do that, then that move on to get the other bikes. And so until our industry really makes it okay to have low-end bikes, all the hardcore companies should be the ones in the stores that are selling these $125 bikes for that entry level, instead of just filling the line in the pockets of a few Asian businessmen that have nothing to do with bike riding.
So your career and everything's taking off. Put up a couple pictures. You're doing X Games.
That's not me, but yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I wish it was.
That's so funny. I was like, he's going to say that.
That's me, I think.
I hope that's you.
Yeah. Oh, that was like, the Boy Scouts asked me to come do a demo. And so I went and did a demo at the Boy Scouts National Jamboree, which I went to when I was a kid in 1989.
So did I.
I was the youngest kid ever to go to Jamboree.
1989.
Yeah.
It was in Virginia.
Yeah.
I was out that one.
Shut up! That's crazy. You look so much older than me.
Yeah, I had hair. That's really funny, too.
I was waiting for that one.
That's really funny, too. All right.
You must have been like 30 when you went there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Moving on. But what I wondered about... That's pretty funny, actually. I had hair.
Yeah.
Here. Touring, bike riding, any crazy stories about places you were, like, on those tours? Anywhere that, like, did you get to really enjoy places, or were you kind of, like, in and out?
I mean, I was younger, so when you travel when you're younger, I was just there mentally to ride bikes. We were going to the skate park or the contest. Everything back then was contest-based, but I was also the youngest one at the time. So there was times when one time we would drive to all the contests. I drove to a contest in Florida. 3 of us, we drove there. But those guys all were over 18. I was probably 17, so they all went out. And I don't drink either, so I didn't really go out. And I remember we were in the seediest motel ever because we all had no money. And I was I was scared to be there. They all went out for the night, and it was in Daytona Beach, Florida, I think. And it was really gnarly. And so I'm in my room, and I hear someone banging on the door, but they're banging on the neighbor's door. And they're, let me in, and he kicks the door down. He's threatening to kill the dude. I think it was a drug deal or.
You're under the bed.
I mean, I'm not that much of. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is live, okay? I'm not saying that.
Sorry.
No. But I was nervous. I had put the chair under the door, and there was a lot of that, a lot of being alone on the road. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm gonna blame it on a few head injuries. I've had a few really head spills. So there are batches of time that have sort of gone, or just sort of kind of remember. But yeah, there's been so many. I mean, I've been to 62 countries. And I've been out of the country over 200 times. I've been to all the states. I've driven to all of them, obviously except Hawaii. And I haven't driven all the way to Alaska. So it's been a lot. It's a lot to remember in 20 some years.
So out of all that, because it's a lot to remember. But is there one tour or one moment from the X Games or something that from your career that side?
When we first started doing the Tony Hawk the Tony Hawk tours, it was an ESPN Tony Hawk tour. And it was like the first time we were on like a real deal like tour bus. We were going for like 3 weeks at a time, I think, every 3 weeks, right? A few weeks off, 3 weeks, and we did 3 of them one summer. And I remember we did a demo and that was like right at the height of Tony was like the biggest name ever. We did a tour, I think, in Louisville, Kentucky. They had this new skate park that was just massive at the time. There wasn't a lot of big ones. And I think there was 30,000 people at the demo. Like we had to get a police escort through the city, and it was crazy. And I remember thinking, like, we're about to be on vacation for a long time. This is awesome. You know, I remember thinking, like, this is next level.
And you still ride quite a bit now?
Yeah, I ride, every week if I can. Last few months I've been kind of taking a little bit of time off. But I rode empty pools yesterday. I snuck into houses yesterday and rode empty pools.
So you're still sneaking into houses doing
that? Yeah. I mean, we try to do ones that we know no one lives there, but it's definitely not our property. Yeah.
So, you know, as I mentioned in your intro, one thing about you is that you've really transcended and you've really reinvented your career a couple times as a stuntman. I want to shift because I think it's so relevant here, especially as travelers. But in 2011, you did the show.
Yes, I did do Stranger in Danger.
So give us the premise of the show.
So Stranger in Danger was two of us, me and this other guy, Zach, also known as Catfish, and we would travel around to countries and do things specific to the country, whether it be taste their foods, do some of their rituals, anything like that specific to the country. Actually, Brian right here, he was the director of the show, so I traveled to about 28 countries, and he is what they call, we call him the wrecker, because he just ruins trips. He actually.
Well, let's say this for a second. So it's not like you were like, oh, I want to go, and we'll put up a picture in a second. It's not like you're like, oh, I really want to go somewhere and try this wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Brian was, as the wrecker, his job was to kind of find that thing was a little different.
So, well, here's the thing: is that everything on the list is usually terrible or dangerous, and you usually get about 10 minutes of like, hey, this is what you're going to do today. You're going to fight a bull. This is what you do. You hold it this way.
Where's this?
This is in Mexico City, and we did a rodeo. We rode a bull right before this, and this is a bareback mare rodeo. But, I mean, you have all these people who are teaching me here, but none of them speak English, so it doesn't help.
And they were like, good luck.
Yeah, and so that's the thing is every time we go somewhere, we did a lot. We traveled, I think the first season was 65 days, and we went home 1 week because both of us had some prior stuff we had to do, but I had gotten hurt sumo wrestling. And so I was really in bad shape. But we did like anywhere from 2 to 5 things a day. We did 160 some activities in 165 days. So we only had 2 days off. So it was, and at the time, I don't know how to say this, but there was a lot of opposition because production didn't really tell us what we were doing or sort of alluded to other things. So we thought we were getting into other things, or sometimes things. We have people called fixers in other countries that would help us fix these things to do. And communication is hard sometimes, so sometimes we thought we were doing one thing and we get there and it's really not. There was only 2 things that I didn't do. One, because at this point, one was the last trip and I was like I said, what made the show on TV so great is because me and Catfish really didn't want to do any of it. Right. So when we showed up there on camera, the emotion was real. It wasn't like the reality shows now where you're like, oh, he's faking it. You're like, I don't want to do this. And so and I sort of figured out in Mexico we were going to enter a Mexican fight club. But I realized that they just had hired Mexicans to beat us up. And so I didn't do that. I protested again. Another one, which was terrible. I'm gonna shorten this next one because it's pretty crude. But there was a machine that would sexually stimulate you in Japan, and they wanted us to do that. And so I was like, I'm not doing that. And so they were like, I'm like, I have fans that that's not in. Will you get new fans? I'm like, I'm not sure I want those fans. I'm not sure I want those fans.
So where's this?
This is actually this is in East Java, Indonesia, at a sulfur mine. You had to hike up a couple miles over this crest into this active volcano, and then down this rocky, terrible, just worst environment imaginable cliff to get down into this sulfur mine. And the sulfur pours out of the mountain in a liquid form, and as it hardens, they break it up with a rebar. And this smoke, you can't breathe in it, and when the wind changes, it fills the whole valley, and you can't breathe, and there's nowhere to go, and there's a lake there that's made out of acid. And these people work there, and Brian, what was the life expectancy? Like 30, 35 is the life expectancy of these people, and they work hard, and they fill these baskets up that they carry over their shoulders up the rocky cliff and halfway down the thing to the way station. And they do that about 3 times a day, and they make about $8 American a day. And they're just in rubber boots, and they've got no face masks, no goggles. So we brought them stuff, but that was one of the first trips I'd ever been to on. This was one of our second week, I think, of our first tour, of our first season, that it really changed my life, because I was like, these people are working the worst job. If you look up 10 most dangerous jobs in the world, this is it. We did all of them. So these people were happy to work, because this is the only job in town. And they were just ecstatic and happy, and it really made you feel like, wow, I'm bummed I don't have service. You know what I mean? And these people were just happy to make $8 a day, and it really changes your perspective, almost to the point, all the experiences on this show, I wish I would have been in a better mood at the time, but like I said, there was a lot of opposition, because it really changed the way I think as a human, and almost it's made it harder to communicate with some people, because unless you have gone through and seen some of the stuff, there's no way you could fully understand. So sometimes I see people complaining about stuff, and I'm guilty of complaining about stuff, but I see people, the way they talk about things, and I'm like, you should really just have your double maple latte or whatever you have, and just shut up. You know what I mean? Go to the beach and finish your day.
Well, you literally walked in people's shoes and did that.
Yeah, a lot of shows we do where people do jobs. I've worked a lot. I've done about 80 episodes of television. You kind of do it. We legitimately did gnarly stuff, and the stuff I don't know how it got insured. We definitely did stuff that we could die. I mean, at one point we did a trust exercise with the Lebanese Special Forces where I stood against a wall and they shot balloons out from about 30 or 40 paces with M4s around me. And then I had a balloon in my mouth and I turned sideways and they shot the balloon out of that. I mean, we did stuff with animals. There was no anti-venom. Brian he's trying to kill me.
So I want to back this up and just kind of backstory, and we'll share more with Alaska. But so I actually met Mike a month and a half ago when I got to Anchorage, and we were on my trip to Alaska. And so
he was on my trip to Alaska.
Same.
Yeah.
But so was Brian.
Yes, I invited Brian. See, the thing is, me and Brian traveled all over the world together, and then he goes to work, I go wherever I do, and we don't get to see each other very much. But for a few years, we had some experiences that you can't experience with anybody else, and no one in this room can, because we got to do these opportunities that were we did things that were insane.
Well,
and so I was I got this opportunity. They were Outdoor Outpost invited me, Dave, and he's like, you can bring somebody. And I was like, he was probably my 5th choice, but no one else. I mean, he was also. And then I thought, who's unemployed? I was like, oh, Brian is. And so I called Brian, and I was like, hey, you want to do this? And as someone who works in the industry, it's hard to go on a week. You're like, what if I get work? You know? And I was like, just look at it. Here's a website. I did it. I'm not kidding you. It was 15 seconds. I got a text back. I'm in. Yeah. And that was a couple days before we left.
Yeah.
So and honestly, after he had committed, I was like, there couldn't have been a better person to go with. And I'm just going to give you a quick 30-second story because I owe him. Because in Italy once, I worked as a semen extractor at a pig farm, 400-pound pigs, and I was not happy about it. And it was a terrible job.